The Somme Memorial Fund, I'll just give you some background on our organisation. The Somme Fund was started in 2009 by Steve Jenkins and myself. But our respective interest goes back a lot further than that. Mine began in 1980 when I was playing at Fulham I was in the summer months, and a friend asked me if I wanted to go on a trip for a weekend to the Somme battlefields, and so I did, and the experience blew me away. It was a tangible experience of seeing the trenches, the scale of the area, and to put in perspective what I'd read at college and studied, and literally it blew me away, and started a lifelong interest in going to the battlefields, and I think I've been every year since 1980, so it's many trips to all the battlefields of the Western Front. My colleague Steve Jenkins' interest began when he read about some of the soldiers who fought, some of the players and their backgrounds, and he was fascinated by that because of his background as being in the Boys Brigade, and but the thing that really kicked off his interest was that in the late 90s he found a beautiful wooden plaque in a skip that had been thrown away by the contractors who were building the new stand at Brisbane Road, and he saved it, renovated it, and from that day on he decided that it would be his intention to make sure that that the players and the guys that served in 1914 to 18 were always remembered. Steve began organising annual remembrance services on the pitch. First one in 2002. He organised coast trips for O's fans, and many of you who are here today have been on those, and they're a fascinating experience going to the resting place of some of those players. It led Steve to take more interest in the story, and he started researching for his book, and he wrote the book, and it was published in 2005, and the centenary edition was updated and reprinted in 2014. Conversations between us in the supporters club after an O's game, we found we had a mutual interest. He told me about the story, and we decided we wanted to bring it to the public domain and to do more to publicise the service and sacrifice of the Clacton Orient players, and for myself as an ex-professional footballer to also learn more about the role that they played in the Great War. Our aim was never to have a memorial built anywhere at that time, but over the next year or two we really started to believe that we could do that. In October 2010 we attended the unveiling of the Football League Memorial in France. Our honoured guest Dean Smith was there with his wife as well, and we also met Keith Rackham, who designed and built our memorial in Fleurs and also here today. But Steve's passion for the O's and the fundraising initiatives that he started to put in place were phenomenal. You know, sponsored walks, talks at local schools, talks to local Boys Brigade, British Legion branches, attendance at Rotary Club and Probus events, the sale of badges, ties, scarves. Every Saturday he was in the supporters club selling something. You know, you might have been sold if you'd have had a Somme badge. And his passion for this has been amazing. He's been featured in TV documentaries, on news and radio programmes, and always presents Leyton Orient in a positive manner, and should be very proud of what he's achieved. In 2011, in July 2011, we we were very fortunate, because of the money that Steve had raised, to be able to unveil the memorial in Fleurs on the Somme, and it's donated. The Commune of Fleurs donated that land to us free of charge, which is an amazing gesture for the commune to make. And we proudly unveiled that memorial, and it was the first to a football club, an English football club on the Somme. There is another one, and I'll come to that a little bit later, with our friends from Scotland. In 2014, we attended a National Football Museum celebrating footballers' participation in the Great War, and Gordon Taylor, who's the chief exec, featured the story of Clapton Orient in his speech. Again, it shows how well known the story was starting to become. And in 2015, 2014 as well, we attended a commemoration service at the recruitment hall in Fulham Town Hall, and 100 years exactly to the day in December 2014, where the Orient players first enlisted. 2015, Steve formed the 17th Pals Battalion Band, who are here today, and you'll all agree he's done a fantastic job in moulding these guys into a wonderful band. In October 16, we co-produced The Great Again play, which is a dramatisation of the story, featuring at Southwark Playhouse. It was a very successful run, and that was co-produced by ourselves and the playwright Michael Head, and was supported by the British Legion and also by the PFA. In 2017, the band continued their development. They played at the Menin Gate, the last post ceremony, and they were featured on the BBC News as well. And 2018, we welcomed Malcolm McCarthy, MBE, and Alex Hoop, our battlefield guide, to our committee to try and help further enhance the work that we're doing. And in 2018, we co-produced The Great Again play again. Again, we had a very successful run at the Waterloo East Playhouse. And in July 2019, we had a joint commemoration service with our friends from Scotland, the Macrae's Battalion Trust, who represent Scottish footballers from Hibernians, Hearts. I've said it that way because everyone thinks it's just Heart of Midlothians, but it's Hearts, Hibernians, Wraith Rovers, Falkirk, Dunfermline, and a host of other Scottish teams that formed into the battalion. And they enlisted a couple of weeks before the Orient lads did in December 2014. We're very honoured to have the Macrae's Battalion Trust committee members with us, and I'd like to ask their chairman, Craig Herbertson, if he'd like to come forward and say a few words.
Thanks very much. I can hardly tell you how much we're honoured and privileged to share in this unveiling. I'm not going to say too many words. I would just like to add that among the footballers that went to the Great War, there were butchers and accountants, rugby players, strong men. In fact, a whole host of lads, young lads, who formed the sporting battalion. And as the Macrae's Battalion, there are many football fans. I'm a football fan. But when they went over the top on the 1st of July 1960, they were soldiers. And like the boys from Orient, we went over at exactly the same time. They were soldiers and comrades, and we like to feel that by being here and representing the Pals Battalion Trust, we're just joining with comrades and friends who share the same emotional and reverence for what we are seeing here today. So thank you very much for inviting us.
Ladies and gentlemen, right, I'd like to now take you briefly back to 1914. In August, war had been declared, and also the football season had kicked off. But it was all going to be over for Christmas, so they carried on playing. But we now know that that wasn't the case, and it went on for another 4 years. There was a lot of mounting concern and public disquiet that football was still being played while soldiers were fighting and dying on the Western Front 3 months into the Great War. And following the example set by the Pals Battalion, who formed just literally a couple of weeks before the Orient lads, a recruitment meeting was held at Fulham Town Hall on December the 15th, 1914, at which Mr. William Joynson Hicks, MP for Brentford, gave a rallying call to arms to professional footballers and appeal for them to do their duty. And here's a short extract from his speech. The game they had been playing was great. The game in Flanders would be greater. The charge of football was good. That with a bayonet, finer. The cheers of the crowd were not to be compared with the sound of the bullet and the noise of the big guns. If asked year's ends what they had done in the Great War, what would they be able to reply? Following this speech, the old captain, Fred Parker, was the first to step forward to sign on the dotted line for the King's Shilling, followed by 10 of his teammates on that night, and they took the lead, definitely as far as English professionals were concerned. And in the following weeks, a total of 41 players, staff, club officials and supporters enlisted into the 17th Battalion of the Middlesex Regiment, later to become known as the Footballers Battalion. I'd now like to introduce you to Major Derek Harwood, MBE, TD, of the Middlesex branch of the Queen's Regimental Association. Derek is also president of the association and a historian and archivist, and he will give some background to the 17th Middlesex Regiment.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Officer Commanding B Company of the 4th Volunteer Battalion of the Princess Louise's Royal Regiment and the Chairman of the Queen's Middlesex Association, Middlesex branch, we're very privileged to be here at this momentous event. In August 1914, Field Marshal Lord Kitchener of Khartoum was appointed Secretary of State for War. On taking up the appointment, he confided in one of his aides that he didn't know Britain and he didn't know the British Army. Kitchener had served for most of his military career in India and the Middle East, and therefore his statement wasn't so surprising, except when you consider the way he set about his new appointment. Whilst others considered the war would be of short duration, some said 6 months, Kitchener was convinced that the country should prepare for a conflict of at least 3 years in duration. This would require a new army of initially 100,000 men who would enlist for 3 years or for the duration of the war. This new army, to all intents and purposes, would be the new regular army, made up of volunteers trained and equipped to regular army standards. The downside was the lack of facilities required to house, feed, clothe and equip such an army. Added to this was the unexpected problem that the first 100,000 were recruited within weeks causing a logistical nightmare. Meanwhile, Kitchener staff struggled with the logistics, recruiting continued apace, and Clapton Orient Football Club were typical in that they were ideal candidates for a new idea, to form a Pals Battalion based on their love of the great game and to accept a new challenge on an even greater game. Within 4 months, team captain Fred Spider Parker of stepping forward as the first man to volunteer for the 1st Football Battalion, Clapton Orient had recruited more than enough to offer to the War Office a new battalion. And that battalion became the 17th Service Battalion of the Middlesex Regiment, the 1st Footballers. Every member of the 17th was now a diehard. Until they were called, the men would live at home and report each day to the Orient ground in their civilian clothing, where they would be taught the basics of military training by old soldiers known as dugouts. They had been recalled to the colours to get over the chronic shortage of instructors. However, the first task was to sort the men into companies and sections and identify the potential officers and senior NCOs. Then the 17th moved to the improvised training camp at White City to start initial training. Typical subjects covered were drill, first aid, drill, map reading, and drill. It would not be a surprise that the main recreation was football. However, well-organised collections amongst the crowd at each match ensured a tiny sum towards purchasing the instruments for the essential battalion band. Unlike most other service battalions, the 12th received their khaki service uniforms fairly quickly, and they were issued to each individual at the White City. Contrary to popular belief, training a new army battalion such as the 17th Middlesex could take up to a year. Kitchener was reluctant to commit any of his new army battalions until they were fully trained and ready for battle. And so it was that on the 18th of November 1915, the 17th Middlesex crossed the Channel and disembarked at Boulogne. The first footballers entered the line on the 10th of December. They did not have to wait long before they were to experience the realities of war, when the 17th suffered its first fatality on active service. 21-year-old Private James MacDonald of B Company was killed by a burst of machine gun fire whilst on sentry duty. He had been just 7 hours in the trenches. From then on and for the next 2 years, the 17th took part in almost all the major battles on the Western Front, including the battles of the Somme. Such was the experience that a commanding officer, having survived the Battle of Flers-Courcelette, wrote, "If hell is as bad as what I have seen at Flers-Courcelette, I would not wish my worst enemy to go there." When Fred Parker and the first 30 footballers took the mayor of Fulham's hand, they could never have imagined in 1,000 years as to what life would be like on the Western Front. On the 30th of November 1917, Captain Alistair McCready Dermid, a 28-year-old captain and company commander of the 17th, was holding an important part of the British line when his position was subject to attack by an overwhelming enemy force. McCready Dermid counter-attacked, driving the enemy back a good 300 yards. A similar attack on his position the next day saw McCready Dermid leading a band of volunteers bombing the enemy back again, capturing 27 and leaving at least 93 dead and wounded. In this last action, McCready Dermid was killed and was posthumously wounded Victoria Cross for his gallantry. Most of the soldiers who unflinchingly followed their company commander into action were around 19 years old. At the beginning of February 1918, the commanding officer broke the shocking news that the 17th Middlesex were to be disbanded, along with many other fine battalions. This was in a reorganisation of the British Army. Over the past 2 years, the 17th has suffered over 900 dead. Many of the men from Clapton Orient who had originally answered the call to enlist were now gone, and there was less than 40 of the original footballers left. In the official regimental history of the Middlesex Regiment, the diehards in the Great War, historian Everard Wirral recalls of the 17th Battalion on disbandment. On the 22nd of February 1918, the 17th Battalion ceased to exist. But those survivors of the 17th and all who read this history will remember their fine record. In November 1918, a thoughtful sovereign, King George V, was concerned that the war-raised battalions of the British Army should not have their contribution to final victory forgotten, and commanded that all such battalions would be presented with a silk Union flag. Depending on certain conditions, including that the flag should become consecrated within a short time, the flag would become a king's colour, on which could be shown 10 battle honours awarded to their regiment. The 17th Battalion were presented with their king's colour in 1919, but sadly without ceremony, as they had ceased to exist. For the same reason, no battle honours were ever shown on the colour. In 1920, the 17th Battalion's King's Colour was laid up in the garrison church of the Middlesex Regiment at St Paul's Mill Hill, with the other colours of the service battalions, 12 in all, including the 2nd Football Battalion, the 23rd Middlesex. In 2016, all the King's colours within the church were now in a fragile state, and they were taken down from their staffs and framed, thus ensuring many more years of preservation. The award of the King's Colour to the war-raised service battalions was intended as a silent but visual gesture of a nation's gratitude to those who had served with such determination and bravery. Never was such an accolade more deserved than to the men of the 17th Battalion of Middlesex Regiment, first footballers, who have played their part, both on the pitch and on the many battlefields, like true diehards. Perhaps the last word should go to the original Clapton Orient team captain, Sergeant Fred Spider Parker. Speaking from the Western Front, there is no team out there that can beat us. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. That was fantastic. I'd now like to ask Catherine Hoot Jenkins to come forward and read a poem called A Sea of Red, which she wrote herself especially for this occasion.
A sea of red. Orient were first, with the others in suit, played their last game and changed their boots, undid their laces, off came the studs, farewell to their home turf, swapping the pitch for mud. Their last game at home, they won it 2-0, a bittersweet win, as from there they were sent to kill. Their 17th Middlesex formed for one and for all. As the whistle blew, they answered their call. In France the poppies burned like fire, as though a sea of red, an eternal flame reminding us now of the blood that was shed. The fields and copse now silent, the birds they rule supreme, but the spirits live on like those of Parker and his team. Such beauty is a contrast of what went on before, the resting place of so many who fought in the Great War. Among them are the Orient lads, Jonas, Mac and Scott. They did their duty, gave their all, forget them we will not. So stand here for a moment on this very special ground, a place not just for football fans, but those from all around. Peace, perfect peace, can that really now be said, as we remember here our glorious dead?
Thank you, Catherine. Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the unveiling of our memorial. And we'd like to welcome our special guest, Mr. Dean Smith, someone you'll all recognise from Match of the Day or Sky News or whatever, whichever programme you want. Needs no introduction. But firstly, I'll ask our chairman, Steve Jenkins, to come forward and formally introduce Dean.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So much has been said about what's been happening 100 years ago that we come up to date now. And our special guest, Dean Smith, needs no introduction to the many Leyton Orient supporters assembled here today. However, he's going to get one, because particularly as we're aware there's people with us this afternoon who are not necessarily O's fans. But Dean joined Leyton Orient from Hereford in June 1997, having previously played for Walsall. He was signed by the manager Tommy Taylor for £42,500. I don't think that would pay for a dinner out now, would it, sort of thing, for some of these footballers. And when he was soon appointed captain and leading the O's very proudly to 2 playoff finals in 1999 and 2001. Dean was a strong defender and also for a time the club's penalty taker. He was, and still is, a confident leader and a good professional, and was one of the longest serving players at the Orient, during which he created an excellent record of scoring a goal in nearly every 6 games, which is some going for a central defender. After 6 years with the O's, having played 282 league and cup games and scoring 36 goals, Dino couldn't turn down an opportunity to sign for Sheffield Wednesday, where he made 62 appearances and scoring 1 goal before moving to Port Vale in July 2004, which was his final club as a player. During his playing career, Dean made a total of 566 appearances, scoring 54 goals. 566 appearances, scoring 54 goals. That deserves a round of applause alone, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Having hung up his boots, Dean couldn't resist being drawn back to Leyton Orient when in December 2004, initially as a youth coach and then promoted to the role of assistant manager, during which he and manager Martin Ling built a successful side, leading Leyton Orient to automatic promotion in 2006. In July 2009, Dean was appointed as head of youth at Walsall before taking the management reins in January 2011, when he led Walsall from the relegation zone to safety in his first 4 months in charge, and also taking the Saddlers to the 2015 Football League Trophy final, before leaving to manage Brentford in November 2015. Moving to more recent times, in October 2018, Dean was appointed head coach of Aston Villa, his boyhood club, and he took his beloved Villa from 14th in the Championship to the Premier League via the playoffs in his first season, as well as the EFL Cup final the following year. On a personal level, I've had the pleasure and honour of playing alongside Dean in a match at Rod Stewart's former home in Epping against Rod's team. Even though the game was supposed to be a friendly, I could see how fired up Dean was, particularly when the offsides and the 50-50s constantly seemed to be going against us, and also hardly ever being awarded a free kick. And I recall a red-faced Dean having to turn his back on the ref on numerous occasions in frustration. But thinking back, we was never going to win that match, as it was Rod's pitch, Rod's football, and the referee was Rod's brother. With everything Dean has achieved and will go on to achieve, one thing is not in doubt, and that is an Orient legend. Once an O, always an O. And no matter where his career takes him, Dean and his family will always be welcome at Leyton Orient. The O Somme Memorial Fund is honoured that Dean readily accepted our invitation, and it is very apt that he is with us today, because as mentioned by Peter, we met up with Dean and his wife Nicola on the Somme almost 11 years ago to the day, the 21st of October 2010, when we assembled in the village of Longueville, along with a large number of people, including Phil Stant, who we're so pleased to have with us today, to witness the unveiling and dedication of the Football League Memorial. Combining Dean's loyal and inspiring service for Leyton Orient Football Club with his interest in the Great War, it's obvious that from an O's perspective, we really couldn't have asked for anyone other than Dean to unveil our memorial today. Dean, we are so very proud of you and wish you every success in your career, and thank you for accepting our invitation to participate in this afternoon's historic ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Dean Smith.
Thank you very much, Steve. I actually feel quite honoured and humbled today to be asked to obviously come here. I've spent 34 years, I think it is, in professional football, and nearly a third of that career has been at Leyton Orient and a third at Walsall. So two clubs very close to my heart, obviously. And when Steve got in touch with me, I was only too happy to come here, and hopefully this will certainly honour and commemorate the lives that people have given for us to be here today. I did get signed up by Rod Stewart about a week later and actually played for his team after that, but it's wonderful to be here today. My family still keep Leyton Orient close to the heart. My brother still goes down there and meets up with friends at the supporters club. My family were always welcomed into the supporters club, and I often saw my dad wearing the old Somme badge, so Steve had certainly sold well there, because my father, as people know, parted with money very seldom. But just from me and my family, just a big thank you, because my father passed away a couple of years ago, and the messages we got from people from Leyton Orient was there for all. So a big thank you, and I'm really honoured. Thank you all.
Pass it on to Alex and Malcolm. There we go. Alex, then. Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you. Stand up this way. Ladies and gentlemen, the O's Memorial.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my job in these next moments to help us to say thank you for what we've been hearing. I don't know about you, but I'm in awe of what I hear. And when you're reminded of your own frailties, of your own weaknesses, and you see such courage and strength in others, that it is very humbling, as Dean said just a moment ago. I was trying to think of a verse in the Bible that I would like to say just at the beginning of this, and there's some words that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, which I think fit the moment really well, and they're words that are said every week in a church, in a communion service. And those words are these: let your light so shine before others, so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So in these next moments, we'll be saying thank you. I want to say thank you to God for the sacrifice of all those who gave their lives, and our Leyton Orient family who gave so much. And your thank you, in whatever way, is just as precious as mine too. I'm going to invite Steve and Dave to come and help me in this next bit.
We're here to commemorate the great service made by Clapton Orient Football Club. But in particular, obviously, we have to make a point of mentioning those that made the great sacrifice. I'll do this in chronological order. I think it's the right way to be because there's different ranks involved here, but I'm not even going to mention the ranks in the initial title, but by name. William Jonas. William joined the 17th Middlesex along with 9 of his Clapton Orient teammates at the specially convened recruitment meeting at packed Fulham Town Hall on the 15th of December 1914. The ever-popular Jonas could play in a number of positions on the pitch, including goalkeeper. In fact, he played in every position except outside left. That always bugs me. Why didn't he play outside left? I don't know. But anyway. But it was as centre forward that he was to gain recognition at the O's, having been recommended to the club by his former schoolboy pal and goal ace, Richard McFadden. They formed a deadly partnership, terrorising the opposition week in, week out, helping Clapton Orient to become a force in the second division as the O's pushed for promotion prior to the outbreak of war. His very good looks and dashing style of play led him to become very popular with the O's supporters, and particularly the female admirers at Millfields Road. So much so that on one stage he was receiving over 50 letters a week from the ladies of Homerton. And whilst very flattered, he felt the need to make a statement in the Orient Matchday programme to the effect that, whilst he appreciated the attention, kind words and good wishes, could they please cease, that he is happily married to his sweetheart Mary Jane. I don't think that will happen in the current day and age, do you, ladies and gentlemen? The Footballers Battalion, as the 17th Middlesex were more commonly known, participated in some of the heaviest and bloodiest fighting in the war. It was whilst in Delville Wood, known as Devil's Wood to the troops, on the 27th of July 1916, that William Jonas and his best friend Richard McFadden found themselves pinned down under constant heavy fire and shelling. And it was during this onslaught that William Jonas gave up his life. George Scott. George Scott was a loyal servant for Clapton Orient, was highly respected, not by only everyone at the club, but also the many opponents who commented on his total commitment on the field of play. His impressive scoring ratio, which includes a hat-trick against Leicester, included many a fine goal. However, contemporary reports state that the finest goal he scored was the winner against Tottenham Hotspur at White Hart Lane on a sweltering hot Good Friday on the 9th of April 1909. When war broke out, he promptly volunteered, joining up with the rest of his teammates into the 17th Middlesex. His fine example on the field of play continued on to the field of battle, and news of his loss after being wounded and taken prisoner left the O's faithful reeling. The following obituary appeared in Oriental Notes on the 18th of November 1916. It is with the feeling of sorrow we inform our readers that another of our players has paid the great price. We have received confirmatory evidence that George Scott died on the 16th of August. Big-hearted and daring as George always was, we can imagine the impetuosity with which he confronted the enemy. To those who knew him personally, he was one of the best, and the thousands who have witnessed his football career will undoubtedly express feelings of sorrow at his untimely end. Our warmest sympathy goes forth to his bereaved wife and children. Although condolence may not lessen the grief, they have the satisfaction of knowing no man could have sacrificed his life in a nobler cause. Richard McFadden. When we were considering a suitable date for the unveiling and dedication of our memorial, various suggestions were put forward from the committee. However, none seemed so apt as today, due to it being the anniversary this very weekend of the passing of Richard on the 23rd of October 1916. Just like his good friend and former school pal William Jonas, goal ace Richard McFadden was also one of the original 10 players to join up with the 17th Middlesex at Fulham Town Hall. He was top scorer for Clapton Orient in the 4 seasons he was with the club, and his impressive statistics of 68 goals in 142 appearances still see him the 6th highest scorer in the O's history, also scoring the winning goal playing for the Football League against the full England team, leading him to be recommended for his first cap for Scotland. However, this was not to be due to the outbreak of war. McFadden was known for his heroism on the battlefield, resulting in him being awarded the Military Medal for Bravery in the Field, as it was known that he often ventured out into no man's land to rescue wounded comrades. A swift rise through the ranks saw him attain the rank of Company Sergeant Major, and he was also in line for a commission. Prior to the war, and before coming to London, his bravery had already shown itself. On several occasions, as it was reported that he had dragged a man from a burning building. And after he had signed for the O's, it was also documented that it had saved the lives of 2 young boys who were struggling in the River Lee, just 2 weeks prior to rescuing a very small child from a burning building in Clapton. For the rescuing of these 3 young children, he was awarded a medal from the Mayor of Hackney. Richard McFadden was mortally wounded by an exploding shell on the 22nd of October whilst leading a line of troops along a trench, and whilst it was thought he would recover, he died the following day in a field hospital and was buried outside the field hospital in Cowan British Military Cemetery, where only a month earlier the former Grimsby Town captain and fullback Sid Wheelhouse was buried. And Sid made 244 appearances during his 7 seasons with the Mariners, scoring on 3 occasions. And after joining up with the 17th Middlesex, he played a number of games as a guest player for Clapton Orient, whilst waiting to go over to France with the battalion. Sid died of gas inhalation, and like Richard McFadden, it was hoped he'd pull through, but alas, it was not to be. They now lie only a row apart. It was whilst under heavy fire and bombardment in Delville Wood in July 1916 that Richard McFadden gave an eyewitness account of the loss of his good friend William Jonas, sending his feelings back to the Orient in the form of a letter which I will now read. I, Richard McFadden, sadly report the death of my friend and oath colleague, William Jonas, on the morning of Thursday the 27th July, aged 26. Both Willie and I were trapped in a trench near to the front in Somme, France. Willie turned to me and said, "Goodbye, Mac. Best of luck and special love to my sweetheart, Mary Jane, and best regards to the lads at Orient." But before I could reply to him, he was up and over, and no sooner had he jumped up out of the trench, my best friend of nearly 20 years was killed before my eyes. Words cannot express my feelings at this time. Yours, Company Sergeant Major, Richard McFadden.
Would you stand, please?
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.